Hey guys, hi, welcome back once again. My name is Vaishali, and having learned quite a few things from, through, and from within human interactions, and having pursued and completed my master's in business administration and in clinical psychology, I today wish to talk about the beauty of growing old. So, in our culture today, and not just our culture, like as in the Indian culture, but I think in keeping with the world culture, there seemingly has been a lot of growing resistance to growing old or growing older, which implicitly and subconsciously goes against the very grain of self acceptance and thereby self love. But probably it also gets confused and conflated with the idea of getting old and growing old or older. Now, if you attentively listen to the two terminologies, if we pay attention to the two terminologies, one is about getting old and the other talks about growing old, where one is a natural organic phenomena of getting old, of having lived another year, of having rotated around the sun by another 365 days. But growing old or growing older talks more about growth. And that is why it is called as growing. And when we talk of growing older, we can kind of correlate it with the growth mindset and the fixed mindset, where getting old to some degree, to some tiny degree, or to some big degree, can be about developing a fixed mindset, developing a rigid mindset, a set mindset, which is very resistant to learning, which is very resistant to curiosity, which is very resistant to growth, which is very resistant to change. However, on the other hand, growing older or growing old, to some degree, large or small, can be equated with having a growth mindset, wherein the sets within the framework of the mind, in some small or big measures, are constantly being changed. And they're constantly being changed because change is the only constant. Because it is only through change can growth and evolution truly happen, which naturally involves fluidity within some structure, which may come across as a bit of a paradox. And yet, if we get curious enough to understand and think over that paradox, we begin to see the nuances of things, we begin to see the nuances of our experiences, the nuances of this universe in a much more open, in a much more engaged way. Growing old can also be about holding the beautiful paradox of having a learner's mindset, a beginner's mindset, wherein there are no biases and preconditioned ideas set, but paradoxically also including the idea of having experiences that are uniquely ours, and being able to amalgamate both of those things to have a beginner's mindset which is driven by curiosity, which is driven by fascination, which is not preconditioned by ideas, identities, thoughts, and beliefs, but also being able to integrate our learned experiences in the same breath. And which is why getting old or older is a little different when compared to growing older. For one is organic, it happens in the due course of nature, while the other is more engaged, is more active, and maybe a little proactive, both with regards to our physical and our psychological aspects, both with regards to our physiology and our psyche as well. And just to cite an example for this, from within my own family dynamics, my mother, who's a gynecologist and who's now 73 years old, became a doctor or at least entered the medical school, entered the medical college roughly 50 years back. And though she was a practicing doctor for a large part of her life in one of the government colleges in Jabalpur, for a large part of her life she never practiced as a practicing doctor. She never had her own clinic and her own hospital. For during the first half of the day till the afternoon, before we came back from school and from college, she was working in the capacity of a doctor. But for the larger part of the day, she was working as a homemaker and as a mother. So a larger chunk of her identity was identified as being the wife of another doctor who was a physician, my dad, was identified as a homemaker, was identified as a caring mother, as a mother. She was somebody who never missed a PTM, who never missed a single sports day. And in a way, having seen her work like that and having grown up with that, we as kids, or at least I as her kid, expected her to be there for the PTMs, though I did not appreciate it consciously, but probably expected it on a very subconscious level, expected her to be there for all the annual days, expected her to be there for all of the sports days. And she religiously and diligently made it a point to be there. She was also somebody who, for the longest time, did not know how to drive a vehicle, leave alone a four-wheeled vehicle, but even a two-wheeled vehicle. She did not know how to ride a bicycle. She did not know how to ride a moped or a scooty. And yet, it is the same person who, when computers were first launched in the country, had enrolled herself for a computer class, probably somewhere in her late 30s or 40s. And when we would go out to play and my father would go to his clinic, she was the one who would go for these computer classes. This person who did not know how to ride any vehicle learned how to ride a four-wheeler, learned how to ride a car, drive a car in her late 40s or in her early 50s. She also got associated with a private hospital after having taken retirement from the government hospital by the age of 58 or 60, and she was driving to the hospital on her own. She is also somebody who had taken admission in the medical college, or rather had become a doctor 50 years back, but had never performed a surgery, performed her first surgery roughly by the time she was 71 or around 72 years of age as the main surgeon. So for approximately 50 years plus or minus, she had not performed a single surgery to deliver a human being, to deliver a child into the world. And yet approximately 50 years later, having learnt the art and the science of working as an assistant surgeon, she performed the task of operating and of delivering a healthy baby into the world. And that is exactly what it means to keep growing older while embracing the natural aspect of getting older. It's not fighting one's own age, but rather accepting one's own age with grace, with growth. And over here, I definitely like to add that growing older, growing up, is not about resisting the change, but proactively seeking the change, proactively seeking the growth, proactively being engaged in learning, being proactively engaged with the aspect of aging and aging well and gracefully, while realizing that it's a lifelong process. It's a process that can be continued till the very last breath, if possible. It's a process that one can be deliberately engaged in. And as her daughter, I would also like to add that though she has shown growth in so many aspects, I think she also needs to learn how to relax, how to take things a little more easily, how to receive things a little more easily, and how to be a little more easy on herself. And as proud as I feel to be her daughter, to have seen her as being identified primarily as a homemaker and as a mother, to now being recognized as a doctor and as a surgeon, while still retaining her identity as our mother, and as proud as I feel to have seen her grow and evolve and change in the ways she has, I personally would appreciate it a little more if she learns how to relax a little bit, if she learns to give herself the permission to be a little easier on herself, and if she gives herself the permission to receive as much as she gives. And I think if she learns to integrate this within her, we again would get to experience a newer, more evolved version of her. We would get to see a newer side of her that is not in resistance to slowing down a little bit, that is not in resistance to giving herself the permission to relax just a tiny bit. And very thankfully, she's at least accepted before me that she still has that to learn, that she still has that nerve or that muscle to grow within her. So let's try and understand the subtle difference between getting old, accepting that, while at the same time be proactively engaged in the art of growing older as we get older. For unless we do that, we are in resistance to our own growth and our evolution. We are in resistance to our own learning. We are in resistance to our own curiosity. So let's try and see and let's try and reflect if we are in resistance to our own growth, to our own growing older. And have we become more open as we have gotten older, or have we become more rigid and inflexible as we get older? Have we actually grown, and are we willing to grow by remaining open to growth? Or have we closed ourselves down and are impassively in resistance and reaction to life, to ourselves? Let's try and think about that. Let's try and reflect on that. And I will see you once again the next week. Till then, stay tuned in. And guys, if you do like the contextual content of these videos, please do like, share, and subscribe.